The first time Teresa raised her voice at me, it wasn't about the lottery or even money. It was about a lamp. The lamp had belonged to her mother, Margaret. A cream-colored shade with roses pressed into the porcelain base. I'd carried it carefully when I moved into their house 3 years ago, thinking it might keep a piece of my wife's presence near me. Teresa didn't want it on the side table. "It clashes with the decor," she'd said, shoving it into the attic without waiting for my reply. That was when I first felt it. A chill in my own daughter's home, the house my sacrifice had helped pay for. On this November afternoon, the chill had returned, stronger than ever. The living room smelled faintly of reheated casserole, the curtains drawn against a gray sky that threatened snow. Bills lay scattered across the coffee table like accusations. Teresa's hand slapped them into order, her nails clicking against the paper as if she were hammering down nails in a coffin. 300 for electricity, 250 for gas. She tossed the papers toward me. "Dad, this can't keep happening." From the couch, Neil barely looked up from the television. His laugh merged with the canned laughter of the sitcom he was watching, a sound that grated against the heavy silence between us. His bulk sank into the cushions as if he owned the house outright, though the down payment had been mine. I sat in the armchair I'd claimed as mine only because no one else wanted it. The fabric sagged, worn down by years, a mirror of myself. I laced my fingers together, my voice quiet. "I pay what I can, Teresa. You know that." Her eyes flashed. "What you can isn't enough. 1,200 a month? That's not even groceries. We're drowning here, and you just sit." I didn't remind her of the house I sold. I didn't remind her of the check for $150,000 that I had placed in her hands, the same hands now pointing at me like I was the problem. Instead, I studied her face. My daughter's face, once soft with childhood, now hard with lines of worry and something harsher. Resentment. Neil finally leaned forward, muting the television. "Maybe it's time you face facts, old man. You can't just live off us." The irony twisted like a knife. Live off them? My pension paid its way, and more importantly, I had given them a roof to stand under. But they didn't see that anymore. To them, I wasn't a father. I was an expense. I let my gaze drift to the window. Outside, a neighbor's child raced a bike down the sidewalk, laughter carrying through the cold air. That laughter was once Teresa's, when she was small and fearless, her pigtails flying behind her as she pedaled down Elm Street. I had run alongside, keeping her steady until she didn't need me anymore. Now, she looked at me like I was the unsteady one, a burden to be pushed away. The lamp in the attic, the house I'd sold, the promises she'd made. It was all beginning to feel like the same thing. Forgotten. The argument didn't end that afternoon. It never really ended. It lingered like smoke in the walls, seeping into every word, every glance. At dinner, Teresa moved briskly around the kitchen, metal pots clattering louder than they needed to. She set down plates with the force of someone making a point without speaking. Neil scrolled his phone, scrolling and scrolling, his thumb moving faster than his eyes. The television hummed in the background, another faceless audience laughing at jokes we didn't share. I sat at the table, the empty chair beside me like an open wound. Margaret's place. I could almost hear her voice reminding Teresa to be gentle, reminding me to keep my temper. But Margaret had been gone 7 years, and her voice lived only in memory. "Dad," Teresa said suddenly, dropping into the seat across from me. "Things have to change. We can't keep bleeding money. We're behind on the mortgage again." Her eyes didn't soften when she said it. They had the sharp glint of someone bargaining for survival, but I could tell survival wasn't the whole story. Pride was in there too. Pride and something bitter. "You know," I answered carefully, "it wasn't so long ago I helped with that mortgage. Without me, this house—" "Don't." She cut me off. "That was 3 years ago. Things are different now." Different. The word carried the weight of a slammed door. Neil finally spoke without looking up. "Maybe it's time you started pulling more weight, Oren. Maybe get a part-time job. Walmart's always hiring greeters." The casual cruelty landed like a blow. I imagined myself standing at a doorway in a blue vest, smiling at strangers while my daughter and her husband built their lives with the foundation I'd given them. My appetite disappeared. I set down my fork. 68 years old, I said. And you want me to spend my last years greeting customers at Walmart? Neil shrugged, his eyes never leaving the glowing screen. Better than sitting around here like a stone. Teresa sighed, rubbing her temples. Look, we're just asking you to contribute more. We can't keep carrying you. Carrying me. The words rang inside my chest, hollow and cruel. I thought of the night Margaret died, of how I'd held Teresa in my arms while she cried, promising her I'd always be there. I thought of the decades in the Ford plant, the 4 a.m. alarms, the overtime shifts, the pension that now seemed like an insult to them. Who had carried who all these years? Silence stretched across the table. The smell of burnt casserole filled the air. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass like it was trying to get in. Then Teresa stood, her chair scraping against the floor. She pulled a crumpled bill from her pocket, $5, and laid it flat on the table in front of me. Here, she said, her voice tight, buy yourself a lottery ticket. Maybe then you'll actually be some use. The bill lay between us like a verdict. I stared at it, at her, at Neil smirking faintly over his phone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt awake. The $5 bill felt heavier than it should have, as if the paper had absorbed every insult and dismissal that had been spoken over it. I slid it into my pocket without a word. Teresa seemed almost disappointed that I didn't argue. Neil chuckled, low and satisfied, as if my silence proved him right about me. But inside, something shifted. Not anger. Anger I'd felt before, and it had only worn me down. This was colder, quieter. Like the click of a lock I hadn't realized was open until now. I put on my coat. The November air outside was sharp enough to bite, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. The streets were dark, the lamps glowing halos against the fog, and my breath drifted in front of me in pale clouds. Each step down the cracked sidewalk reminded me of the morning walks to the Ford plant, 37 years of steady rhythm. Left, right, left, right. Back then, those steps had carried me toward responsibility, toward family. Now they carried me away from both. The convenience store on Merton Avenue buzzed with fluorescent light. Inside, the heater hummed and a bell chimed as I pushed the glass door open. A young cashier looked up from his phone, gave me the polite nod reserved for people who seemed invisible. I walked to the counter where the lottery machine glowed. Rows of tickets were displayed like promises, scratch-offs, Powerball, Mega Millions. Shiny slips of paper selling hope. One quick pick, I said at first. My fingers brushed the crumpled bill Teresa had given me. But then I paused, pulled out my wallet. Inside were 2 crisp tens, tucked neatly beside Margaret's photograph. Her smile in that photo was warm, forgiving, steadied me. Actually, I said, my voice firmer, make it 3. 1 in the name of Teresa Hargrove. I set down the wrinkled bill. And 2 in the name of Orrin Peters. The machine hummed and clicked, spitting out 3 slips of paper. The cashier slid them across the counter without comment. I picked them up carefully, the way I used to handle blueprints at the plant, each one precise and fragile. Back outside, the cold air wrapped around me again. I tucked Teresa's ticket into my shirt pocket and slid the other 2 into my wallet, pressing them next to Margaret's picture. For a moment I stood there on the corner, the neon sign buzzing behind me, the traffic light turning from red to green though no cars passed. I could feel it, that something had changed. Not because I believed in luck, but because I believed in truth. For years, I had been a shadow in my daughter's home, tolerated but not valued. Tonight I had acted, quietly, carefully, but with intent. The walk back took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to imagine the look on Teresa's face when she checked those numbers. 20 minutes to rehearse the calm expression I would wear. 20 minutes to understand that, for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being carried, I was the one holding the weight. And I wasn't letting go. Tuesday night arrived like a storm you can hear long before it breaks. The house buzzed with a nervous energy that hadn't been there in years. Teresa couldn't sit still. She paced from kitchen to living room, wringing her hands on the dish towel she kept forgetting to put down. Neil, for once, wasn't glued to his phone. He leaned forward on the couch, eyes fixed on the television where the lottery host's smile beamed too brightly. The 3 tickets lay on the coffee table, pale slips of paper lost among empty mugs and crumpled bills. To anyone else they looked worthless, but I felt their weight pressing against the room, pressing against me. "Dad," Teresa said, her voice sharp but trembling with something new. "Hope. Which one's ours?" "The one with your name on it," I said evenly, gesturing toward the small pile. She snatched it up like a child grabbing candy, holding it close to her chest. Neil's thick fingers plucked at the others but discarded them with barely a glance. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, and watched. The lottery host's voice boomed from the screen. "Good evening, America. Tonight's jackpot, $30 million. The numbers began to roll, white balls clattering inside a clear globe like marbles in the hands of fate. 7. The host called. 7. Teresa shouted, eyes wide. "We've got it." "Don't get too excited," Neil muttered, though his knee bounced with nervous energy. 23. "That's 2, she whispered. 2 in a row." The tension in the room tightened, every breath shallow. My chest ached with it, but I stayed silent, a spectator in my own play. 31. Her voice cracked. 3. "We've got 3. Neil grabbed the ticket, staring at it like it might vanish. "Let me see that." 42. Teresa gasped. "For numbers." 4. Her laugh was high and unsteady, the laugh of someone already tasting freedom. 58. She was on her feet now, trembling. 5. 5 numbers. Neil's face flushed, sweat beading on his forehead. He clutched her arm as if steadying himself against an earthquake. The host's voice deepened for the final reveal. "And tonight's Powerball is 12. Silence. Then a scream tore from Teresa's throat, raw and disbelieving. "We won. Neil, we won." She waved the ticket like a flag, her hands shaking so hard the paper nearly tore. Neil bellowed with laughter, lifting her off the ground and spinning her, shouting numbers over and over like a victory chant. I sat perfectly still. Their joy was a storm crashing through the room, but I remained the eye of it, calm and centered. $30 million. To them it was freedom, escape, a new life unshackled from bills and burdens. To me it was something far sharper, truth. Because as they celebrated, neither of them noticed the small line of black letters at the bottom of the ticket. The name printed there, clear as daylight. Not hers, mine. The living room pulsed with their laughter, their bodies moving as though they'd shed gravity itself. Teresa clutched the ticket to her chest. Neil shouted promises of boats and houses and trips abroad. The television blared, forgotten, its bright lights echoing the chaos inside the room. And I sat there, unmoving, watching. When their frenzy finally slowed, Teresa turned to me, breathless, her cheeks wet with tears of joy. "Dad," she whispered, almost reverent. "Do you understand what this means? We're saved. No more bills. No more arguments. No more depending on scraps." She looked at me as though I were part of the victory, though moments earlier she'd wished me gone. The irony cut deeper than any insult. Neil straightened, puffing his chest like a king addressing a subject. "Well, old man, looks like things are about to change. We don't need your pension pennies anymore. We don't need you." The words fell heavy, final. Teresa didn't protest. She just lowered her gaze, clutching the ticket tighter, as though my presence in their new life was negotiable at best. I rose slowly, the chair groaning beneath me. My knees ached, but I stood tall. "Change," I repeated softly, letting the word hang. My eyes fell to the ticket in her hand, the delicate rectangle she believed was her salvation. "Yes, it has changed." Something in my tone stilled the air. Teresa frowned. "What are you talking about?" I stepped closer, each movement deliberate, measured. The years of swallowing my pride, of bowing to their disdain, all condensed into this one moment. "Tell me, daughter," When you celebrated just now, did you even glance at whose name is on that ticket? Her brow furrowed, confusion clouding the flush of excitement. It's ours. I gave you the money. Look again. The ticket trembled in her hands as she lifted it closer. Her lips moved silently, tracing the letters printed in stark ink. Then her face drained of color. Orrin Peters. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked at me, then back at the ticket, as if sheer will could change the truth written there. Neil snatched it from her grasp. His eyes scanned the paper, slower this time, the alcohol-fueled haze evaporating in an instant. His hands curled, crushing the edges. No, this is wrong. You bought this for us. I held his gaze with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I bought 3 tickets. 1 with your name, 2 with mine. That, I pointed to the slip in his fist, is mine. Silence pressed in. The only sound was Teresa's shallow breath, ragged and uneven. Her tears had returned, but not the kind born of joy. You tricked us, Neil spat. No, I said, voice calm as stone. You revealed yourselves. I just listened. I stepped forward, plucked the ticket from his unresisting grip, and slid it into my wallet. For once, their powerlessness hung heavy, not mine. The house, the bills, the years of dismissal, all of it receded in that instant. I had something greater now, and for the first time in 3 years I felt free. The night I left, the November air was colder than I remembered. My breath rose in clouds as I stepped off their porch, suitcase in one hand, $30 million folded neatly into my wallet. Behind me, Teresa sobbed in muffled gasps, and Neil cursed under his breath like a man watching a fortune slip through his fingers. I didn't turn back. The driveway felt longer than it had in years, each step echoing with memories of the man I had been when I first arrived at this house. Hopeful, grateful, believing in promises of family. Now, each step stripped away another layer of that man until only truth remained. At the end of the street, I paused beneath a flickering lamppost. The house stood glowing in the distance, warm yellow light spilling through the curtains. But I knew better now. Warmth could be an illusion. That house had never been my home. The motel room I found that night smelled of disinfectant and worn carpet, yet it welcomed me honestly. No judgment, no ledger of debts, no voices reminding me of what I cost. Just 4 walls and a bed I paid for with my own hand. I lay there staring at the ceiling, Margaret's photograph on the nightstand beside me, the winning ticket tucked beneath it. For the first time in years, I slept without the weight of someone else's contempt pressing on my chest. The weeks that followed blurred into paperwork and signatures, bank transfers and cautious congratulations from officials who would never know the story behind the numbers. The check they placed in my hands was larger than anything I'd held in my life, yet the real weight was invisible, the quiet satisfaction of dignity reclaimed. I moved north into a house that faced Lake Michigan. The mornings there smelled of pine and salt, the windows opening wide to endless water and sky. No bills scattered on the table. No voices reminding me of my age or my supposed uselessness. Just silence, broken only by the waves, steady and eternal. Sometimes, in the still hours of dawn, I would pour 2 cups of coffee and place one opposite me, as though Margaret might walk in, sit down, and smile. She never did, of course. But the ritual reminded me of her, of the promises I had kept even when others had not. As for Teresa, her number lit up my phone for weeks before I finally changed it. Apologies, please, bargaining. They all sounded the same, hollow and late. I let them fade into nothing. Family is not bound by blood alone. It is bound by love, by loyalty, by respect. And once those are gone, all that's left is noise. I live quietly now. No fanfare, no indulgence beyond what peace requires. But every morning when I look out at the lake, I know this truth. Dignity is the rarest fortune, and I had to lose everything to win it back. And so, in the end, the lottery didn't give me freedom. It only revealed that I already had it when I walked away.